They say your 70th birthday is a time for reflection, a time to count the candles, hold your family close, and feel grateful for having made it this far. I was planning to do just that until the universe handed me a different kind of gift, one I wouldn't wish on anybody. My name is Lucinda Hayes. I'm 67 years old, and I live alone in a quiet little cul-de-sac in Greenwich, Connecticut. A place where the hedges are trimmed twice a month, the Homeowners Association sends out laminated newsletters, and the biggest scandal used to be whose dog left a mess on the jogging path. Retired now, but I spent over 35 years as an aerospace systems engineer. I've built jet engines, raised 2 daughters, mostly on my own, and survived the grief of losing my husband to cancer 12 years ago. But the one thing I never expected, never even imagined, was that my own family would try to take from me the one thing I had left that still made me feel alive. Now, to most people, a car is just a car. But not to me. Not when it's a 1995 Bentley Turbo R British Racing Green with the original walnut trim and lamb's wool rugs. It was the car my husband left me in his will, a car he saved up for, tinkered with every Sunday, and treated better than half the politicians in this country treat their voters. That car wasn't just metal and oil. It was memory, identity, and history all rolled into one. The Bentley was legally owned by an LLC I set up shortly after Earl passed away, Hayes Heritage Motors LLC, with me retaining 51% ownership, and each of my daughters, Celeste and Miranda, holding 24.5% each. It was a clean estate planning trick my lawyer had suggested to avoid probate headaches down the line. The title and insurance were managed through the LLC. I paid the maintenance myself, about $3 a month in antique vehicle insurance, and a bit more in elbow grease. I mention all this because those little technicalities, the ones no one reads until it's too late, are what saved me later. But I'm getting ahead of myself. This year, my granddaughter Phoebe, a bright, ambitious 26-year-old with more ideas than experience, offered to plan my birthday celebration. "Let me handle it, Nana," she said, flipping through her iPad. "We'll keep it local, tasteful, no over-the-top drama. Promise." Now, Phoebe had recently lost her job at some cryptocurrency startup that promised to reinvent ticketing through NFTs. Frankly, I didn't know what half of those words meant, and I suspect neither did their investors. Still, I saw the look in her eyes, the way she wanted to prove herself useful again. I said yes. I gave her a modest budget, $10,000, maybe $12, if the food was hot and the band wasn't insufferable. But she said, "Don't worry about it, Nana. I've got this handled." The party was set for a Sunday afternoon in May. Clear skies, perfect weather, and a backyard dressed up better than I'd seen since Miranda's wedding. We had string lights, folding chairs wrapped in satin bows, and a jazz trio from Stamford playing Gershwin like they meant it. The HOA made their rounds twice that day, first to remind us about parking limits, and again to issue a $550 fine for an unregistered truck parked overnight. I thought it was just a catering vehicle. I didn't ask questions. Family and neighbors gathered. People gave toasts. Celeste even managed not to complain about her sciatica for a full hour. And then, just as Phoebe wheeled out the cake white chocolate mousse with raspberry layers, my wrist buzzed. A text notification from Wellington Trust Bank. Wire authorization alert, $2,700,000 pending from Hayes Heritage Motors LLC. Escrow transfer awaiting client verification. My heart skipped, then jolted, then pounded. I stepped away from the table, ignoring someone's joke about checking Facebook during cake. My hands trembled as I opened the banking app. There it was, a pending wire from my LLC account initiated that morning, flagged for final authorization. The recipient, Orion Prestige Vehicles, a luxury car dealer based in Los Angeles. Escrow manager, Timothy Langford. Email attached. I clicked on it. Dear Miss Hayes, attached is the confirmation of your wire transfer for the full purchase amount of $2.7 million. The Bentley Turbo R is scheduled for enclosed trailer pickup this evening. Please confirm. My knees buckled, not metaphorically, actually buckled. I had to brace myself against the patio wall, blinking away the dizziness. That was when it hit me, the HOA fine, the truck parked overnight, the strange man I had seen walking toward my garage on the Ring camera 2 days ago and thought was a landscaper. I had watched the video absent-mindedly while sipping tea. I didn't even notice he had a key. I knew something terrible had happened, but I didn't know how deep the betrayal ran. I walked back to the party. The band was midway through Fly Me to the Moon. People were smiling, sipping Prosecco. Phoebe was handing out slices of cake, basking in compliments. I looked at her, really looked, and I noticed the earrings. Cartier. The bracelet. Not from Etsy. The phone. Newest model. "Nana," she said, turning toward me. "You okay?" I opened the party planner's tablet she'd left on the table. I tapped the banking app, still logged in. The wire transaction glared back at me. I looked around at 40 people I'd fed and raised and buried secrets for, and I spoke clearly, loudly, and without shaking. Phoebe, cancel the dessert, and somebody tell the caterers to stop serving. I just froze the party account. No more payments are going through. This event is over. Silence spread like spilled wine. People stared. Someone dropped a fork. Phoebe's smile vanished like a curtain yanked away. That was the moment my family realized the old lady still had her mind, her power, and her proof. And I wasn't going to let them take anything else. I always believed that the quietest things carry the most weight. A look, a hesitation, the sound of silence after someone's been caught. That afternoon, the only thing louder than my voice was the quiet that followed. After I made the announcement, I stepped away from the gathering. No tears, no speeches, just purpose. Phoebe followed me inside, stammering something about a misunderstanding. I didn't respond. I walked straight into my study, locked the door behind me, and pulled up the Ring camera archives. I keep 2 Ring systems, one for the front one in the garage. Redundant, some say, paranoid others say. I call it practical. The footage from 3 nights earlier made my blood run cold. There it was 3:47 a.m., grainy black and white, but clear enough. A black tow truck idling at the curb. A tall man in a polo shirt unlocking my garage with a key and carefully backing the Bentley out. My daughter Celeste stood in the driveway wearing her robe and slippers, checking her phone like she was waiting for takeout. She signed a clipboard, exchanged a few words with the man, then waved him off as he disappeared with my car into the night. I stared at the screen for a long while, letting the betrayal sink in. I didn't cry. Instead, I opened the drawer where I kept my LLC formation binder, my trust documents, and most importantly, my will. I flipped through the folders until I found the POA agreement I had signed 3 years ago. It clearly stated, "Power of attorney shall only activate in the event that the grantor is medically incapacitated for more than 48 hours as confirmed by a licensed attending physician." I had never been incapacitated. I had not even had a head cold in 6 months. So how did they move the car? Where did that wire transfer originate? I texted Douglas Renshaw, my estate lawyer of 20 years. He answered in minutes. "I just got back from dinner. What's going on?" "Emergency," I typed. "Unauthorized vehicle transfer. Someone's using the LLC. I'll be there in 30. Hold everything. Don't call police yet." While I waited, I dug further, logged into the LLC's bank portal. The wire request had been submitted with a digitally signed approval, the signature mine. Only I never signed it. Then another message came in, this time from HOA subject line violation, unregistered tow activity. I opened it. "Dear Ms. Hayes, a report has been filed concerning a commercial vehicle loading a private asset from your garage at 3:40 a.m. this past Thursday. This violates HOA guidelines requiring overnight vehicle permits. Fine, $550. We ask that all future transporters register ahead of time with security." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because of the absurdity. They fined me for my own car being stolen. When Douglas arrived, I greeted him at the door with a folder in one hand and a glass of cold water in the other. He didn't need tea or cookies. He needed facts. I walked him through everything, the Ring footage, the wire notification, the signature. Then I opened a manila envelope I hadn't touched in months. Inside, a notarized codicil that had been filed with county records and sent to my home 2 weeks ago. I'd glanced at it when it first arrived, assumed it was a courtesy copy of my last update, and set it aside. I never noticed the extra clause. Douglas flipped through the pages, frowning. "Here," he said, tapping with his pen. "This paragraph says the LLC can be fully controlled by Phoebe in the event of your incapacity per a physician's statement." He held it up to the light. "Lucinda, you didn't write this, and that's not your signature." I shook my head slowly. "No, it's not." He pulled out his phone. "I know the notary who supposedly signed this. If this is fake, we're looking at felony forgery, possibly conspiracy to commit wire fraud. It was no longer a family matter. It was criminal." Phoebe knocked at the door while we were still reviewing the documents. "Nana, can I come in? I think there's been a big mix-up." Douglas looked at me. I nodded. She entered, face pale, voice high. "I didn't know you'd be upset. I thought Mom said you'd agreed to update the trust, and I assumed—" I raised a hand. "Phoebe, you signed a wire transfer request under my name. You approved the sale of a $2.7 million vehicle I never agreed to sell. There's no mix-up. This was a heist, dressed in lace and brunch." She started to cry. But I thought you didn't care about the car. You never drive it anymore. I stared at her flat and calm. I don't drive it because it's sacred. That car is the last thing your grandfather touched. That car is older than your mother's first marriage. That car has value you clearly do not understand. Phoebe sobbed harder. I thought I could help. And I'm broke. And I didn't know it was illegal. Douglas interjected. Ignorance is not a defense, Miss Hayes. Not in federal court. I told her to leave the study. She left muttering something about mistakes. I turned to Douglas. I want to call in a notary. I want a full audit of the LLC transfers. I want a search on the VIN through land registry. He looked me in the eye. Are you sure? I nodded. They tried to take my memory. They tried to make me forget who I was. Now it's time they remembered who they're dealing with. By Monday morning, my house didn't feel like a home anymore. It felt like a crime scene. I'd spent most of Sunday evening with Douglas combing through every inch of paperwork, document scans, and LLC correspondence. We were methodical, two old dogs refusing to let a single squirrel slip past. And sure enough, just after midnight, Douglas looked up from his screen and muttered, "We've got a forged quitclaim deed." The document was filed with the county clerk's office 2 days before the party. It transferred operational ownership rights of the Bentley Turbo R from Hayes Heritage Motors LLC to Phoebe Hayes as acting majority holder, which was impossible. The LLC was locked to a 3-party structure. I held 51%. Phoebe wasn't even a named beneficiary. And the worst part, the signature field for Lucinda Hayes' managing member was scribbled in a way that made it look almost like mine if you tilted your head and forgot how to spell my last name. Douglas whistled low. They got someone to notarize this. I leaned closer. The notary stamp read, Daniel Marsh, licensed Notary Public, Brooklyn, New York. I don't know any Daniel Marsh. Never met him. Never signed anything in Brooklyn. And certainly never approved the liquidation of the most valuable asset tied to my husband's legacy. I sat back, cold fury pooling in my chest. So let me get this straight, I said. They forged my POA trigger, faked my signature on a quitclaim, sold my car through a wire transfer, and hid it all behind a birthday cake. Douglas nodded grimly. That's the shape of it. At 9:30 that morning, I drove marched into the county records building with Douglas at my side and a notarized copy of my true will and trust, including the original POA agreement. The clerk, a pleasant young man with a nose ring and a calm voice, took one look at the 2 conflicting documents and said, "Ma'am, I'll have to flag this for potential fraud. It'll trigger an internal investigation." "Good," I said. "And while you're at it, I'd like a certified copy of every document filed in my name in the last 30 days. Every last one." He blinked. "Yes, ma'am." When we returned to my house, Celeste was waiting on the front porch, arms crossed, expression tight. "I suppose you're proud of yourself," she said, no greeting. I stepped past her without a word, but she followed me inside. "Nana didn't even want the car anymore," she spat. "You let it sit like a museum piece. You barely even touched it." I turned. "That car was never about driving, Celeste. That car was about remembering. That car was about your father." She scoffed. "He's dead." I felt the slap in those words, but I didn't flinch. "Yes, he is. And that's why I won't let you strip away what little is left of him." She laughed bitterly. "This is about control. You always wanted to remind us who held the keys." "No," I said. "But now that you mention it," I pulled out the escrow freeze letter we'd filed that morning, complete with the bank's confirmation. "The wire is blocked. The funds are frozen. The car hasn't fully transferred title because the dealer is still waiting on a verification call that'll never come. You know why." I leaned in. "Because I'm not incapacitated. I'm not dead. And I'm damn sure not someone you can outmaneuver with Google Docs and a fake notary stamp." She stared at me like she didn't recognize the woman in front of her. Then her phone buzzed. She didn't answer it. I raised an eyebrow. "Let me guess. Phoebe's calling to check if the wire hit." Her silence confirmed it. I turned to Douglas, who stood in the foyer flipping through the copies we'd picked up. "Celeste," I said softly, "you have one chance to step away from this, to come clean. Because what's coming next doesn't care who you are to me." She shook her head. "You'd ruin your own daughter over a car. You already ruined yourself. I'm just cleaning up the paperwork." She left in a huff, slamming the door behind her. Douglas handed me another sheet. "Here's the worst of it," he said. "We found an email from the physician who claimed you were incapacitated. No license number, no address. It's a Gmail account created last Tuesday. They use that to justify activating the POA clause. I closed my eyes. This wasn't a mistake. This was a plan. Douglas looked at me. So what's next? I didn't hesitate. We bring in a notary. We document every piece of this. And we make them sign a confession before this turns into a prison sentence. He nodded. You want me to call in the police? I thought about it. Then I shook my head. Not yet. Let's give them one last chance to remember how family works. I paused. Before the law reminds them what theft looks like. It's funny how things shift when a notary public shows up at your house. People straighten their backs, choose their words more carefully. The air becomes thin, and suddenly everyone remembers their middle names. I had Douglas schedule the family meeting for Tuesday afternoon, just 2 days after the party turned criminal. We arranged it in the sunroom, the brightest part of the house, with clear sightlines and not accidentally my Ring camera rolling from across the mantel. On the guest list, my daughters Celeste and Miranda, my granddaughter Phoebe, and of course Douglas with a fresh stack of folders and a clipboard that might as well have been a gavel. Beside him sat Marcy Gillespie, a local notary I trusted, mid-50s, buzzed hair, and a no-nonsense way of speaking that made you want to hand over your birth certificate. I wore my late husband's Rolex, the one he gave me on our 25th anniversary. Not for symbolism, for timing. I wanted to know exactly how long it would take before someone broke. They didn't make me wait long. Celeste arrived first. She brought that false air of indignant calm, the kind people wear when they've been caught but still believe they're the smartest person in the room. Miranda came next, visibly nervous but not involved. She kept her distance throughout this ordeal, and I could see her regret dripping off her every glance. Her only crime was silence. Then came Phoebe. She looked smaller. No makeup, no designer bag, just a canvas tote and a jittery expression that didn't match the fierce young woman who had once told me she could out-negotiate any Ivy League man alive. I began without standing. I'm going to say this once. You don't have to like it. You just have to listen. The room hushed. I've spent nearly 70 years building a life I could be proud of. I've worked in labs where men twice my age took credit for my designs. I've buried a husband who left me love but not enough legal armor. And I've protected a legacy for this family that none of you apparently valued. Phoebe looked down. You forged documents to steal a car you didn't understand. You impersonated medical professionals to trigger legal mechanisms you thought I wouldn't notice. And you did it all behind a cake and a jazz band. That's not desperation. That's strategy. Douglas stepped in, flipping open a folder. Here's the good news, he said. The car was not fully transferred. Escrow was paused. Title was flagged. Which means criminal charges, while available, are not mandatory. He placed a document in front of each of them. This is a confession of wrongful action with full acknowledgement of forgery, misrepresentation, and attempted asset transfer. It includes a promise to forfeit all future claims to Hayes Heritage Motors, LLC, and to relinquish any share of inheritance tied to Lucinda's personal estate. You will also commit to a structured repayment of all fines, expenses, and legal costs incurred as a result of this event. He gestured to Marcy. This will be signed and notarized here and now, or we proceed with full legal action, including felony charges for wire fraud and falsification of county records. Silence. Celeste was the first to speak. You wouldn't dare press charges. We're your daughters. I looked her dead in the eye. You stopped being my daughters the moment you decided my worth was negotiable. Phoebe sniffled. Nana, I didn't mean. You meant to take what wasn't yours. You meant to lie. You meant to hope I wouldn't notice. What you didn't mean was to face the consequences. I gestured to the documents. This is mercy. If you don't want mercy, I can call the Greenwich Police Department in under 3 minutes, and you'll sign whatever they bring instead. Miranda, God bless her, signed first. Even though she wasn't directly involved, she wanted her distance made legal. She slid the paper back with shaking hands. Phoebe followed, barely able to keep her signature straight. Celeste hesitated. I still think this is unfair, she muttered. You don't care about us. You care about a car. No, I said. I care about boundaries, and the difference between love and leverage. You used my love as an excuse for your leverage. That ends today. She signed. Marcy stamped each document with a satisfying clack, one after another, sealing not just the papers but the new reality we now lived in. Douglas handed me a final form. Last piece. This returns 100% LLC control to you, Lucinda. Retroactive, irrevocable. I signed it without blinking. Celeste stood to leave. Is that it? Not quite, I said. You'll be covering the $550 HOA fine. The bill's in your name. Since you invited the tow truck without authorization, it's your penalty to pay. Phoebe whispered. What about the party I spent almost $17,800 on it? I smiled. And you used my LLC credit line to do it, which has now been locked and reversed. The vendors have been notified that payments frozen pending fraud investigation. That cake. Consider it evidence. They left quietly, bitterly broken, in different ways. As Douglas packed his briefcase and Marcy said goodbye, I finally let out a breath I'd been holding since the wire alert. I wasn't angry anymore. I was free. And they finally knew I still had teeth. 2 days after the notary meeting, I got an email from Phoebe's accountant. Yes, my granddaughter, who couldn't figure out how to organize her grandmother's birthday party without committing felony fraud, had an accountant. The subject line simply read, Asset Liquidation Timeline. Inside was a spreadsheet outlining the sale of her West Side condo, the one gifted to her by Celeste 2 years ago when her NFT career had taken off, and a tentative timeline for releasing $1,300,000 in equity. Apparently, she was still hoping the Bentley deal would go through because the numbers matched the market value of a vintage collector asset British origin. She wasn't planning to return the car. She was planning to keep the cash. Not anymore. Douglas forwarded that same email to Timothy Langford, the escrow manager at Orion Prestige Vehicles. Timothy replied quickly. His tone had shifted since we first spoke. At first, he thought I was some elderly woman panicking about a late wire. Now he knew better. Miss Hayes. Upon further review and legal confirmation, the transaction has been flagged for fraudulent transfer of asset under dispute. The funds remain held. Title will not be released. Kindly confirm how you'd like to proceed regarding the vehicle return and restitution of fees. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I took my time. Because now it wasn't just about the Bentley, it was about setting precedent. Celeste texted me the next evening. No apologies. Just, can we talk? I invited her to lunch. Neutral ground, public setting. A small bistro near the marina where the waitstaff knew me by name and didn't flinch if I raised an eyebrow. She showed up in oversized sunglasses and tension tucked into every crease of her face. I'm here to make things right, she said. Then let's talk about the jewelry. She blinked. What jewelry? Your grandmother's diamond set, the one you've been keeping in your safe since the estate settlement. I want it sold. Her lips parted, then closed again. That's family property. So was the car. Silence. We need $55,000 to cover legal fees, reversal charges, and damages related to the transaction. You and Phoebe will pay it. I don't care how. She fidgeted. Phoebe's broke. Then she'll be less broke after she sells her designer handbags. Or that electric Jeep she financed with a cosigner loan you guaranteed. Her cheeks colored. Miranda's helping, I added. She's offering $10,000 from her savings. Voluntarily. To show good faith. Celeste looked away. That's not fair. She didn't do anything. Exactly. Over the next week, the pieces started to fall into place. Phoebe sold her condo. Not the whole thing, just her half of it to her ex-boyfriend's uncle, who apparently had a passion for undervalued real estate and overvalued millennials. She wired $35,000 into the LLC escrow account. Celeste, after dragging her feet and issuing multiple rants in the family group chat about financial abuse, sold the diamond set and a small plot of land in upstate New York she'd been saving for a future retreat. Her contribution $10,000 and a note attached with a scribbled whatever. Miranda, true to her word, added her share with a simple one-line message. For what it's worth, Mom, I never believed you were wrong. We were still short. So I gave them a choice. I'll forgive the remaining amount, I said, if you agree to one final condition. They braced. You're going to write a letter, each of you. Handwritten, signed, scanned, and notarized. And in that letter, you will admit what you did and promise never to interfere with my estate or property again. You will use the words, I was wrong, not misguided, not misinformed, wrong. Phoebe asked if she could type it. You may not. Celeste asked if Douglas would be reading it. Number, I will. Miranda had hers delivered within 24 hours. The others took longer. But eventually I had 3 letters, all framed, all notarized, all tucked neatly into my fireproof safe beside my original marriage certificate and the deed to my house. The day the Bentley was returned was cloudy. A covered trailer pulled into the cul-de-sac around 10 a.m., escorted by a tow specialist who knew better than to ask questions. The car rolled out slowly, quiet, regal, untouched. I signed the release, handed the man a tip, $80 in crisp 20s, and backed the car into my garage myself. It purred like nothing had ever happened. That night I opened a bottle of wine I'd been saving for no particular reason. Earl and I had bought it together years ago, back when we still believed we'd drink it for our 50th anniversary. I toasted the sky, then toasted myself. To boundaries, I said aloud, lifting the glass. May they be crossed rarely and enforced ruthlessly. The Bentley slept behind a reinforced garage door. The LLC was mine again, and my family. They were learning what it meant to earn back trust, one difficult, expensive lesson at a time. There's a moment after betrayal, after repair, after the noise dies down, when you get to decide who you are again. I had spent 70 years building a life out of logic, loyalty, and late nights. But I'd made the mistake of assuming those values had passed down like my chin or my stubborn streak. They hadn't. And that wasn't my fault. But it was now my responsibility. So I got to work. The Monday after the Bentley was returned and the final payments were processed, I scheduled a meeting with Douglas to rewrite my estate plan from the ground up. We sat in his office for 3 hours, surrounded by oak bookshelves, the soft ticking of a wall clock and the faint smell of citrus oil and dust, an oddly comforting combination. I'm not here to punish them, I told him, but I'm not going to reward treachery with silence. He nodded, sliding a yellow legal pad across the desk. Let's start with what you want. I want clarity, and protection, and control. Real control, not just signatures on some LLC paperwork. I want the next version of me, whoever inherits my name, my assets, my stories, to know exactly what matters and what doesn't. Douglas gave a small smile, spoken like a woman who's been betrayed but not broken. I didn't smile back. We began with the will. The previous version had been drafted 10 years ago, shortly after Earl passed away. It divided assets equally between Celeste and Miranda, with a trustee structure for Phoebe to receive controlled disbursements until age 35. That structure was gone now. Strike Celeste, I said. Remove her as a primary beneficiary. She may receive heirlooms-only items without liquid resale value. What about Miranda? She remains, in full. She may not have interfered, but she owned up. That counts for something. Phoebe. I paused. Create a conditional clause. She may receive a scholarship fund no more than $120,000, but only if she completes a degree at an accredited university and maintains passing grades. Any violation voids the gift. Douglas raised an eyebrow. Tough love. Earned. Next came the LLC restructure. I retook full ownership. 51% became 100. We renamed it Hayes Legacy Trust LLC and filed the amended control notice with the county clerk the next morning. Then the POA clause. The old version had a conditional activation after 48 hours of incapacity. New rule, I said. POA can only activate with a signed statement from 2 independent medical professionals, one of whom must be from my regular care network. Douglas made the edit without question. By the time we were done, the stack of documents had doubled. So had my peace of mind. That evening, I burned the original copies in my backyard fire pit. It felt theatrical, maybe even petty. But I was in no mood for subtlety. I sat outside under the stars, wrapped in Earl's flannel jacket, watching the legal kindling crackle and curl into ash. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just breathed. The Bentley sat silently in the garage behind me, its chrome catching bits of starlight through the glass. For years, I'd treated that car like a shrine. Now I saw it as something else, a litmus test. It had exposed the fault lines I'd ignored, had forced every hidden loyalty to the surface. It was no longer just my husband's final gift. It was the reason I had finally reclaimed control over my life. 3 days later, I received a letter. Handwritten, in pen, from Phoebe. Dear Nana, I don't expect you to forgive me, but I wanted you to know I finally understand. It wasn't about the car. It was about respect, about knowing the difference between what you inherit and what you deserve. I didn't deserve it. I've enrolled at Columbia, starting fall semester, digital design. No more crypto schemes, no more shortcuts. I hope one day I earn your trust back. Love, Phoebe. I folded the letter slowly, then placed it inside a manila folder labeled Possible Redemption, right beside Miranda's confession and the latest trust paperwork. That Sunday I went for a drive. Not because I needed to, because I wanted to. The Bentley slid onto the coastal highway like it had been waiting for me all along. The engine was smooth, the seat warm, The wind had a bite to it, but I liked the reminder that I was still alive. As I passed the marina, I thought about Earl. We never did get to that 50th anniversary, I said out loud. Then I smiled for the first time in weeks. But I think you'd be proud of how I handled our 70th. I never thought I'd be one of those women who post their business online. But 1 week after everything settled after the car returned, the new will was filed and the trust restructured. I found myself typing out a message in the Nextdoor app. My hands shook a little as I wrote it. Not from fear, from clarity. Question for the neighborhood. If your family forged your signature, tried to sell your late husband's car, lied about your health, and used your birthday as the staging ground for it all, would you forgive them? Would you stay quiet? I didn't. I chose the long road, the legal one, the lonely one, but also the cleanest one. Curious what others would do. I signed it simply, Lucinda Hayes Crescent. I expected silence, maybe a neighbor or two offering a polite, "Sorry this happened." What I got was something else entirely. By the next morning, the post had over 400 reactions, 68 comments, and 3 private messages from local women I'd never met. One wrote, "You're the reason I finally filed a restraining order against my daughter's husband. Thank you." Another, "My son tried to change my will last year without telling me. You just gave me the push I needed to rewrite everything." And one blunt and brave simply said, "You're the old woman who bit back, and I needed to know you existed." It was strange being seen, not pitied, not patronized, seen. That afternoon I sat on the back porch with my neighbor Alice. She's 72, a retired opera teacher who wears mismatched earrings and still drinks from the same mug she's had since Reagan was in office. "I read your post," she said, sipping iced tea. "Regret it?" I asked. She looked at me sideways. "You kidding?" I screenshotted it. We laughed. Then she got quiet. "You know, it's not just about the car or the money. It's about what people think we're too old to do, to fight, to say no. They think we'll roll over." She nodded. "Or be too tired to raise hell." Turns out we're just getting started. The neighborhood started to shift after that. Not literally. The sidewalk still cracked under tree roots, and Mr. Kowalski still refused to mow his lawn more than once a month, but the tone changed. People stopped me during walks, asked me questions, called me Miss Hayes instead of Han. They no longer saw a widow in a warm coat, they saw a woman who'd survived a siege and built a wall with her own blueprints. Even the HOA backed off. That $550 fine, they rescinded it. "Technical error," they said. "No," I corrected. "A moral one. Glad you fixed it." Phoebe showed up on my porch the next weekend. She looked different, no false polish this time. She wore jeans, a Columbia hoodie, and no makeup. In her hand, a Tupperware of lemon bars, the kind she used to bake with me as a child. "I thought you hated these," I said. "I did. I don't anymore." We sat quietly eating lemon bars in the fall air. "I wanted to say thank you," she said finally. "For what?" "For not turning me into someone I couldn't come back from." I let that hang in the air, because sometimes silence says more than absolution. She looked at me, tears building. "I was wrong, Nana. About everything. I know. I want to earn it back, whatever you'll let me earn." I looked at her. "Then start with this. Learn to respect what you don't own. Don't ask for trust, build it. And never, never use the words I thought you wouldn't notice around me again." She nodded, not as a child being scolded, but as a woman being shown a way forward. And next time I added, "Bring chocolate chip. These are too tart." We laughed, just a little, but it was real. That night I went back on Nextdoor. I posted a reply to my own thread. "Thank you to everyone who reminded me that boundaries don't make us cruel, they make us free." I didn't lose my family. I found the edges of it. And I'll say this now for anyone still wondering. If someone's love for you requires you to stay silent, small, or stolen from, that is not love. That's extraction. Bite back. You're allowed. The comments filled with hearts and hand claps and quiet affirmations. And somewhere inside me something uncurled. Not vengeance, not pride, just peace. The week before Thanksgiving, I took the Bentley out for a ride, not to go anywhere in particular, just to move, to remind myself that I still could. The weather had turned. The air had that crisp edge, the kind that wakes your bones and makes you pull your collar up. But I liked it. It kept me alert, present. I pulled onto the coastal route just as the sun was cutting through the clouds, casting gold on the water like a promise. There was no destination, no playlist, Just me, the road, and the steady rhythm of possibility humming beneath the wheels. I wasn't escaping. I was reflecting. And in that reflection, I began to see the whole thing for what it was, not a story about a car or even a betrayal, but a lesson in ownership. Not the kind stamped on paper and filed at the county clerk's office. The other kind, the one we carry in our chests, over our lives, our memories, our legacies. When I married Earl, I was 25. He was already well into his 30s, confident in a way that made me nervous, but he never made me feel less. He said, "Lucinda, you were born to be the executor of your own story. I'm just lucky to be a chapter." He meant it, and I had forgotten. The years wore me into habit, comfort, complacency maybe. And when that birthday came around, when they tried to strip it all from me in the name of convenience or efficiency or what Dad would have wanted, they weren't just stealing a car. They were trying to edit me out of my own book. But I'm still here, and I rewrote every page they tried to take. The will is final now, the trust locked, the LLC fully in my name. There's a notarized codicil in my safe, adding a conditional clause that no assets may pass unless the inheritor has volunteered 200 hours in elder care or legal aid. Let them earn what they once thought they were owed. The escrow hold I placed on the old property Celeste tried to leverage, still frozen. I might release it one day, or maybe I won't. And the Ring camera footage from that night, Miranda's face at the door red with shame, I didn't delete it. It lives on a hard drive in my drawer labeled, "In case I forget who I am." A few weeks ago, a neighbor asked if I ever felt lonely. I told her, "Only when I lie to myself." Truth is, I've never felt more alone, and never more solid. I eat dinner alone now most nights, sometimes just a sandwich. Sometimes I get fancy and make shrimp scampi with white wine sauce, even if it's just me and a kitchen radio humming classic jazz. I light candles, not for show, not for guests, for warmth, for ritual. I talk to Earl sometimes, just a few words here and there. "You were right," I say. "Legacy is more than things, but damn, I'm glad I kept that car." A week before Christmas, Phoebe sent me a photo. She stood outside a campus building holding a small certificate. Nothing flashy, just a pre-term program she'd completed early. The caption read, "One step, one brick, love P." I didn't reply, but I smiled and printed the photo. It sits on my desk now, beside the new trust deed, beside my wedding ring, beside the keys to the Bentley. Tonight, as I sit in this house, mine by name, mine by law, mine by fight, I look out across the yard, the frost beginning to settle on the hedges like lace. There's no sound but the wind and the low hum of the heater kicking in. I am not waiting for an apology. I am not hoping for reconciliation. I am not afraid. Because some women get smaller with age, and some grow sharper, quieter, heavier with meaning. Like iron. And if they ever come again, papers in hand, sweet smiles rehearsed, whispering words like inheritance or what's fair or family should share, I'll meet them at the door. Keys in one hand, will in the other, eyes steady. And I'll say, "You had your chance, and I had mine. I used mine well."